Hello, my name is Erna Siemens and I lived in Cape Dorset, Nunavut for 10 years. I worked there as a teacher and I learned very quickly that life in Cape Dorset, Nunavut is quite different than life in southern Canada. First thing I noticed is there were no trees. As my plane was coming into Cape Dorset, I noticed all I could see was mountains but no trees. Another thing I noticed is there were no roads, which is also very unusual. The only way you can get into a community in Nunavut is to fly in. There are no roads on the whole territory. The third thing that I found was very different is they have a different kind of alphabet. It's called syllabics. It's made up of little symbols. And people had unusual names like Arnikala, Pudigu, Taitusi, very different sounding names. Those are the first three things I really noticed. Like I mentioned, Nunavut, we're in Cape Dorset, we have lots of mountains. And what made this unusual is I came from the prairies where it was flat, so I found that very unusual. And when people say it's cold in Nunavut, they're probably right. There's snow pretty well year round. We get snow at the beginning of the school year, it leaves the end of the school year, and in the summer we can see it on top of the mountains. So you see snow pretty well for the whole year. Nunavut is a territory just north of where you live, north of Quebec. It's actually a big territory with very few people, 32,000. The capital city is Iqaluit, which means the place of fish. The premier is Eva Ariak. Right now there's an election, so she won't maybe be the premier next month, but she's the premier today. Cape Dorset is famous for three things. The first thing Cape Dorset is famous for is Inuit art. This is a soapstone carving made by one of my students, and on the bottom it says Cape Dorset, Nunavut. His name is Peter Parr, and he wrote his name in syllabics. This is a carving that Cape Dorset is famous for. They're also famous for prints. One of the famous printmakers is actually a lady called Kanoyuak. And you can see they even made stamps from her prints. They're very, very beautiful. The second thing Cape Dorset is famous for is mining of diamonds and gold. This is another one of my students. His name is Napachi Sharkey. He made this ring for me. It's made of silver with a gold polar bear on there. So that's the second thing that Cape Dorset is famous for. The third thing is hunting and trapping. Hunters in Cape Dorset love land food. So they go out and they hunt polar bear, they hunt caribou, fox, they hunt seal and char. And not only do they hunt for food, they also make clothing out of it. This boot is actually made out of seal skin, part of it. If you notice this jacket, which was made for my son, it has a fur, fox fur. And they also make clothing. This was also made for my son, Nathan. You see his name is Nathan on here. This is a traditional Eskimo hat. Nunavut is probably the most famous, and what it's known for is the polar bear. And it has its own special license plate in the shape of a polar bear or a Nanook. So in ending, I just want to pretend that you are my students in Cape Dorset, Nunavut. What would it be like to be in a class in Nunavut? And I'll say that it was a big surprise for me, because when I walked in, the children were wearing clothes that look like this. They probably don't wear them traditionally now, but they probably still do wear a lot of these traditional clothes. On their feet, they had hammocks, and they had these traditional parkas with fur trim. And if you go into the classroom, some of your classmates may have unusual names, like Taitusi Tunali, Maria Shuna, Arnikala Kermikpik, but probably the most difficult name I had to try to practice was Taitusi Huvianak Tuliak. Took me a while to practice on that one. But this is what you would learn in your grade 2 class. You would learn Inuktitut, very little English in grade 2. This is the number 1, Atausik. Number 2, Mako. Number 3, Pingachu. Number 4, Sitama. And number 5, Talitma. That would be your lesson probably in Inuktitut. But what's different than in a southern school, if you were a girl, you would learn how to cook traditionally and to sew traditional clothes. If you were a boy, you would learn how to make traditional tools and maybe a traditional sled or kamak. This is probably the biggest difference between going to school in Nunavut and going to school in southern Canada. Things are very, very different. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.